Okay, Hare Krishna. So the second canto is titled as Cosmic Manifestation. And if you recollect that the first canto, it ended with the uh, questions from Maharaj Parikshit to Sukadev Goswami. So in the 19th chapter, towards the end of the first canto, we see Parikshit Maharaj going to the bank of the river Ganges to fast for the last 7 days. Sages from all of the universe come and he asks a question and there is debate, what's the right answer. They're not able to come to a consensus. And then Sukhdev Goswami comes. And then Maharaj Parikshit, he places the same question in front of Sukhdev Goswami. So what does he ask him? He says that, what is the way of perfection for all persons? And especially for one who's about to die. And he asks for a little bit of more specificity also. He says, what should a man hear, chant, remember, and worship? And what he should not. So, Shravana Kirtan Smarana Vandan. He asks for that what should a man hear, Shravan, what should he chant, Kirtan, what should he remember, Smaran, and worship, Vandanam, and also what should he not. That's the end of the first canto. In the second canto, we will see Sukhdev Goswami begin to give his instructions to Maharaj Parikshit. Following the footsteps of his Guru Maharaj and his father, Srila Vyasadeva, Sukhdev Goswami begins speaking by first remembering the personality of Godhead. So, first canto, first chapter, it began with Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And we had discussed at the time that Srila Vyasadeva had been instructed by Narad Muni to speak about that which is most potent and the highest duty, because Vyasadeva had spoken so many things in the Vedas. But now Narad Muni said, speak about one thing that is most potent, and that is the highest duty. So Vyasadeva, he starts with Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, which essentially is the summary of the Bhagavatam, that worship the son of Vasudeva, Lord Krishna. We see Sukadev Goswami start with exactly the same way. He says Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So kind of similar to his father and guru Srila Vyasadeva. Srila Vyasadeva had given many paths to the people, Karmkand, Jnanastam. Sukadev Goswami himself, as he admits in the 9th verse of the first chapter, second canto, he says that even I was an impersonalist, but I have been corrected after hearing the Bhagavatam, which is why right up front he declares that only person that one should give the highest obeisances is to Bhagavate Vasudevaya, to Lord Krishna. So then he begins to then he begins to speak about the specific questions of Maharaj Parikshit, which is how to live and how to leave, and how not to live and how not to leave. So these questions, the beginning of the answer, they appear systematically in the second canto. So the second canto is the shortest canto of the Bhagavatam. It has only 10 chapters in it, and the 10 chapters are divided into 3 sections. The first section, which is chapters 1 to 3, is the conversation between Sukadev Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit. And the essential message that is delivered in this section is the superiority of bhakti. Second section is chapters 4 to 7, which is a conversation between Brahma and Narad Muni. And the topic discussed over here is the primary and the secondary cosmic creation, Sarga and Visarga. The third section, which is chapters 8, 9, and 10, is the conversation between Brahma and Lord Vishnu. And this chapter contains the essence of the Bhagavatam. This section contains the essence of the Bhagavatam, the Chatushloki, the 4 seed verses of the Bhagavatam. It also enunciates the 10 topics of the Bhagavatam and gives a deeper philosophical basis for the Bhagavatam. So then let's start with the first section, which is the conversation between Sukadeva Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit. So when Maharaj Parikshit had placed this question before Sukadeva Goswami, he had also said that I'm about to die. What should I do? And Sukadeva Goswami says, don't worry about this. And he gives the example of King Khatvanga. He says that you have 7 days to die. King Khatvanga, he actually had only 1 moment to live. When he asked the Devas how much time I have to live, they said you only have 1 moment to live. In that 1 moment, he completely absorbed himself in the thinking of the Supreme Lord and perfected his life. So the point that he was making is that 7 days is ample time. Just 1 moment thinking about Krishna is sufficient. Then he first talks about what you should not do. Because Maharaj Parikshit says, what should one do and what should I do and what should not be done. So he says that you should not live like a Grahamedi. So, Dehapati Kalatradish, Atma Senasya Satswapi, Tesham Prabanto Nidanam Pashyanapina Pashyati. He talks about those who are Dehapati Kalatradish, that Deha means the body, that they're attached to the body and that which is related to the body. Their family, their wife, their wealth, and Tesham Pramato Nidanam. And even though they see that death is approaching, Pashyanapina Pashyati. They see it, but they do not see it. So that is the conduct that Sukadeva Goswami says, do not do this. He says that the lifetime of such an envious householder is passed at night, either in sleeping or in sex indulgence, and in the daytime, either in making money or maintaining family members. Because they lack Atma Tattva, which is knowledge of the spirit, they do not inquire into the real problems of life. And unfortunately, then they reach a very ignoble, a very disastrous end. So now he has explained to him what not to do. So what should he do? So in terms of what should do, Sukadeva Goswami will speak 3 chapters and he will give a step-by-step map of the path to the Lord. So the first chapter, which is also titled The First Step in God Realization, is actually the Brahman realization, in which he describes the Virat Roop. So this is the first description of the Virat Roop in the Bhagavatam, and we will see Virat Roop described several times in the Bhagavatam. Just in the second canto, the Virat Roop will be described 3 times. In the first chapter, 5th chapter, and 10th chapter. In the first chapter, it is described as an object of meditation. That for those who are too attached to the material conception, they cannot directly think about the Lord in a personal form. They cannot directly think of even a spiritual conception. So, but they can see the Lord in matter because they're attached to matter anyway. So for them, best to meditate on the Virat Roop. So essentially, the Virat Roop is a material conception of the Lord. So the Virat Roop is described, it gets described variously, but in terms that is easily perceived. So sometimes the Virat Roop is described in terms of the planets, sometimes in terms of the Varnas and the ashrams, the Brahman, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas. Sometimes it's described in terms of the natural elements, the mountains and rivers and clouds. So these are all valid understanding. And these are the ultimate message that is given over here is that everything that you see around yourself is there because of the presence of Krishna within it. So maybe you can't see Krishna directly, but you can see the mountains, you can see the rivers, you can look into the sky and see the planets and the stars. And then just meditating on the fact that these are the angas of Krishna, that the taste of water is Krishna, that the rivers are the veins of Krishna, that the clouds, they are the hair of Krishna, the crown of Krishna. So indirectly, one thinks of Krishna. Now, of course, the question is that if Sukadeva Goswami wants to speak about bhakti, why is he speaking first about Virat Roop? And same answer, that if in Bhagavad Gita, before speaking about bhakti, Krishna speaks about so many things. He speaks about karma and gyan and astang. He speaks about, in chapter 10, the impersonal form of Krishna, chapter 11, the universal form of Krishna. And then he speaks in chapter 12, the personal form of Krishna. So not to mislead the people, but because there are some persons who cannot take to bhakti directly. There are some people who find it difficult to accept Krishna as a person. So Krishna doesn't want to lose them. So he says, okay, if you're materially engrossed, you see me in matter. If you're after power and mysticism, then you see me as the super soul. And through this process, the person is purified. In the second chapter, then Krishna, Sukadeva Goswami, he goes to the next stage, which is the Lord within the heart. So now he is talking about the yogis. He is talking about those who are sufficiently purified to see the Lord within their own heart. So in Astanga Yoga, there are 8 stages, and one of the pivotal stage over there is dharana. So dharana is what is the conception with which you will be meditating. Dharan means to acquire. So what is the mental conception that you will take on when doing your meditation? So for those who are full of material desires, their dharana is the Virat Roop. For those who are without material desires, their dharana is Paramatma. And they follow the path of Astanga Yoga, meditating on the Paramatma in their heart. So this is the next stage, that after having meditated on the Virat Roop with a heart full of material desires, when one's material desires becomes extinguished, then one now begins to desire to meditate on the Paramatma, which gets us to the third chapter, which is titled Pure Devotional Service, the Change in Heart. This is the highest stage, where Sukadeva Goswami, he talks about the mercy for the devotees in Shuddha Bhakti. in pure devotional service. And then he makes the point that so the title of the chapter is Change in Heart. So bhakti is very easy, but very difficult also, because bhakti comes from inside out. The heart needs to change. One needs to, from the heart, one needs to accept Krishna as the savior, the master, the the highest object of worship. The other forms, they can come from outside. One can on an intellectual basis try and appreciate the Lord and get Brahman realization. One can develop detachment and meditate on the Paramatma. But bhakti is love. And love is, if there is love, it is the easiest thing to happen. If a woman is in love with the man, then it is very easy for her to serve him. If she is not in love with the man, very, very difficult, impossible to serve him. So that is why Srila Prabhupada translates this as change in heart. But this is the ultimate goal. Now, it's not an external imposition. By nature, the soul is in love with Krishna. That is the intrinsic nature of the soul. So it's not imposing something that is not there. It is simply uncovering. So the summation of the first 3 chapters is in this verse in the 3rd chapter of the 2nd canto. Akama sarva kamo va moksha kamo dharadi tivrena bhakti yogena yajita purusha param. So akama sarva kamo, that whether you are without desires or whether you are full of desires, sarva kamo va moksha kamo dharadi, or you are desiring liberation. Tivrena bhakti yogena yajite purusham param. In all situations, if you worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead in devotional service, then that is the sign of a man with broader intelligence. Essentially, it's a recommendation that regardless of wherever you are, that you're sarvakama, you're full of desires, you're akam, without desires, mokshakam, you're desiring liberation. But a person with superior intelligence will take the shelter of Krishna. So this is the end of the first section. And then we see over here that Sukadeva Goswami has presented the 3 successive stages from Brahman realization to Paramatma realization to Bhakti. And as I mentioned, he presented it so that he's able to attract all kinds of people. But he also says Bhakti is the highest. He also presents it as some of the acharyas give this analogy that if you go to a jeweler's shop and they have to show you a pearl, they will put it on a dark velvet cloth and show it to you. Because in contrast with the dark velvet, the pearl, it becomes very beautiful, it shines nicely. So similarly, when bhakti is presented against the more rigorous and the more difficult paths of karma and gyan and asthang, it shines. When somebody sees, for karma, I have to do this, and for asthang, I have to do 60,000 years of meditation. And then for bhakti, you have to sit and peacefully hear Krishna Katha, then bhakti shines at that moment. So the message that Sukadeva Goswami gives to Parishit Maharaj is that so he had asked that what should I think about? What should I remember? And the message that he gives is that you should think about, remember, chant, and worship Krishna. And by doing this, all your material aspirations are purified, and you will attain the lotus feet of the Lord. So, Sukadeva Goswami, while glorifying bhakti, has also glorified the process of acquiring bhakti. What's the process? Shravana, Kirtan, Smarana, Bandhan. And out of these four, Shravan and Kirtan are the most potent because they are the most easily available and easy to practice. And how does one do Shravan Kirtan? That's what is happening there. Parishit Maharaj is doing Shravan and Sukadeva Goswami is doing Kirtan. So essentially he's saying that Bhagavatam is the key to the answer to all your questions. So firstly, he says that the immediate answer to all your questions is bhakti. In order to practice bhakti, Shravan Kirtan. Bhagavatam offers you Shravan and Kirtan. So the answer to all your questions is sit over here and listen to the Bhagavatam. And that is the answer to our question also. Because that's the question that Parikshit Maharaj is asking. That is also relevant for us. That we have to somehow or else listen to the Bhagavatam. So this is the end of the first section, the first 3 chapters of the Bhagavatam. The second section, which is chapters 4 to 7, is a description of Sarga and Visarga. It's a description of the primary and secondary creation. So after Parishit Maharaj hears this glorification of bhakti and the glorification of Bhagavatam, he begins to now inquire about how is this universe created. Now it's interesting that it looks like it's a non sequitur. That here Sukadeva Goswami is talking about the glories of bhakti, and Parishit Maharaj is saying, can you tell me what is the process of the creation of the universe? But the answer is again the same, that while approaching the Lord, Parishit Maharaj is very careful that he does not want to jump into the intimate pastimes of the Lord directly. So he is now inquiring about the external energy of the Lord. Because Sukadeva Goswami has already told Parishit Maharaj that this universe is created and maintained by the Lord. So he is now approaching him with deference and reverence. That before I inquire about the internal energy of the Lord, before I ask about how the Lord interacts with his devotees, the pastimes of the Lord, let me first see how does he interact with the material world. And also because he is in the material world. So this is our first connection with Krishna is within the Lalita Mataji, do you want to mute there's some disturbance coming from your phone. Thank you. So he says, first tell me the process of creation. So in the 4th chapter, we essentially see these questions by Maharaj Parikshit on the process of creation and the meditation of Sukadeva Goswami. So he's setting an example of how to reveal the esoteric secrets. So he does not want to say something like, I think so, I believe so, and this is what I understand. He wants to speak what he has been told. So when we are dealing with transcendence, matters of transcendence, staying true to the words of the acharyas is very, very important, because it also reflects the mentality of the person who is speaking. If the person thinks that I can jump over my guru or my guru's guru or Krishna, then that person is simply going to become a mental speculator. So Sukdev Goswami, he wants to establish first by example, because he is an acharya, and also factually. He does not want to say anything that he has not been told. So the essence of the fourth chapter is Sukdev Goswami praying to Srila Vyasadeva and praying to the ascendant acharyas that they empower him to speak. And then what does he speak? He quotes a conversation between Brahma and Narad Muni. So we notice over here that it's not that he's speaking things that he says, this is what I understand, but he's actually quoting a conversation that happened in the disciplic succession between Brahma and Narad. So that gets us to the next two chapters, 5th and 6th, in which Narad Muni once approaches Brahma. And Narad Muni says that, my dear father, you are the greatest personality in this universe. I see you doing so many wonderful things, creating this universe, so many species you have created. Tell me more about this creation. How does this happen? So Narad Muni essentially asks Brahma 6 questions. That what is the symptom of this manifest world? Basically, what is the so symptom means that how can we experience this manifest world? Yad rupam. Rupam means the form that falls on the eyeballs. And Brahma says Panch Mahabhutas, that the 5 elements are the manifest symptom of the material world. There's nothing else in the material world other than these 5 elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Everything that we see is a combination of these 5 elements. Then Narad says that Yad Adhishtanam, that what is the shelter of this universe? And Brahma, he gives this beautiful verse. I'll recite it just because it's so poetic. He says, Narayana Paradeva, Deva Narayana Angjaha, Narayana Paraloka, Narayana Paramaka, Narayana Parayogo, Narayana Paramtapa, Narayana Paramgyanam, Narayana Paramgati. So everything essentially is it takes shelter of Lord Narayan, Paraveda. That the whole, all the knowledge, all the demigods, Deva Narayana, Narayana Paraloka, all the worlds, the heavenly kingdoms, Brahmaloka, everything is under the shelter of Lord Narayan. Narad Muni says, okay, this is good. Now can you tell me, how is this universe created? And in response to this, Brahma explains the process of sarga. So the primary creation. So the universe essentially grows through 2 stages of creation. There is a primary creation that is enacted by the Lord himself. And it continues till the point that Brahma appears. And then Krishna delegates the creation to Brahma. Look, I have done everything. Now you take over. These are the seeds. This is the soil. This is the water. This is the sunshine. This is the process. Now you sow the seeds, you water them, you make sure they have proper sunshine, and let them flourish. So that is the sarga, secondary creation. So for Yata Srishtam, how does this Srishti come? Lord Brahma, he explains sarga, or primary creation. And in this, he explains how everything comes initially from Krishna. Krishna expands ultimately into Mahavishnu. Then from Mahavishnu, by the glance of Mahavishnu, the Pradhan is created, which is essentially all the materials that is needed. They are present in an undifferentiated form. They're just like in the soil, everything is there to create a tree. The branches, the leaves, the fruits, the flowers, but it's all undifferentiated. But only when the seed comes in, then the soil, by the potency of the seed, becomes differentiated and then produces this mighty tree. So similarly, the pradhan is like the soil. It has everything present in it in an undifferentiated form. But when the Lord, he seeds it with his Ichha Shakti, and he seeds it with the jivas. The jivas enter, and along with the jivas enter two more things, karma and swabhav. So the jivas enter with their own destiny, and they enter with the swabhav is essentially the modes of material nature. They enter with their own propensities, and then by the action of time. So time is the one that agitates the pradhan, and the pradhan then becomes the mahatattva. So in mahatattva, everything is differentiated. The modes are differentiated. The pancha mahabhutas are differentiated. Jiva is there, karma is there with their karma, and kal, time is there. And then the pradhan, it is successively differentiated. The mahatattva, it successively differentiates. In the mode of goodness, it's the mahatattva. In the mode of passion, it's the sutra tattva. In the mode of ignorance, it is ahankar. So it is from ahankar or false ego that the material world comes. So ahankar in the mode of goodness, it creates the potency of the mind. So the jnana shakti. Ahankar in the mode of passion, kriya shakti. And ahankar in the mode of ignorance, dravya shakti. So the jnana shakti is the ability to think and understand. The kriya shakti is the ability to do. And dravya shakti is that which is acted upon, which is essentially the panchamahabhutas. So with all this coming into play, now the universe is created. So this is a summary description of the creation. So having answered this, Brahma is then asked by Narad Muni, I have one personal question for you. All these philosophical questions you have answered nicely, but I have a personal question for you. Brahma is like, okay, what is it? So Narad Muni says that you appear to me to be all powerful, that this whole universe has been created by you. But yet I see that you're meditating on somebody. So who are you meditating upon? Under whose shelter are you there? And Brahma, he truthfully answers. He says that I only create that which has already been created. And I am meditating on him who has actually empowered me to create, who gives me not only the material to create, but the ability to create. And that is Lord Narayan. So, so in the summation of the sixth chapter, Brahma, after having talked about such deep technical topics, because now he's talking about the creation, etc. If you read the fifth chapter, I mean, you did read the fifth chapter, but if you read it in details, lot of technical details over there. So Brahma says that the only reason my words are true is because I have taken shelter of the Lord. The only reason I've been able to create is because I've taken shelter of the Lord. And then he openly admits that even though I am doing all these wonderful things, I don't understand the Lord. But I understand enough to glorify him. I understand enough to know that I can't understand him. And because of this, I do not fall victim of pride. That despite I'm doing all these wonderful things, I always meditate on the inconceivable glories of the Lord, and that keeps me humble. So this is a very, very interesting aspect of Krishna's relationship with his devotees and with us also. So I was reading one lecture and hearing one lecture, and the person was, in a humorous way, he was saying that that in the jiva's relationship with Krishna, the conditioned jiva's relationship with Krishna, Krishna is like a chaste woman. So when a chaste woman falls in love with a man, she will never say, I love you. But by sadabhav, sadachar, smita, and sanket, she will indicate. So sadbhav means by good conduct. Sadbhav means by good emotions, by having a positive emotion. Sadachar is by good conduct. Smita is by smile, and sanket is by indications. So she will not say, I love you, but she will create an environment that is favorable for him to say. So Krishna, he's waiting for us to propose to him. So like a chaste woman, he's not coming to us and saying, I love you. But by his conduct, by his regard for us, by his smile on us, by all the other direct and indirect sankets, he's saying, I love you. Now, all that he's waiting for us is to propose back to him and say, Krishna, I love you. And then the relationship is consummated. So the second section ends with Sukdev Goswami speaking about the scheduled incarnations of Krishna. Because Parishit Maharaj had also asked that after the creation, how is it maintained? Now, one way that it is maintained is by the Virat Roop. So this is where the Virat Roop comes into play, because through the Virat Roop, through the energy of the Virat Roop, Krishna is maintaining. But Sukdev Goswami says beyond that, actually this is Sukdev Goswami quoting Brahma, that beyond that, the universe is maintained by Krishna personally coming. So he speaks about the 25 incarnations of Krishna. He speaks about incarnations like Kapila, Dattatreya, the four Kumars, Narnarayan, Prishni Garbha. He mentions about more prominent incarnations like Lord Ram and Lord Krishna, the Dashavatars. So through all these incarnations, Krishna is coming personally again and again in order to inspire his devotees by Smita and by Sanket, also to carry on the process of maintaining the universe. So this is the end of the second section. The third section of the second canto is basically further questions by Maharaj Parikshit about tell me more. So 8th chapter is full of, I think Parishit Maharaj asked 36 questions. So tell me more about this, tell me more about that. And these are details. So he has understood the broad brushes. Now he's asking details. Tell me more about this. Give me the philosophical basis of the Bhagavatam. And in the 9th chapter, then Sukadeva Goswami will now quote a conversation that is even more ancient. So he was initially talking about a conversation between Brahma and Narad. Now he will talk about a conversation between Brahma and Krishna that happens at the beginning of the universe, when Brahma is just born and he prays to Krishna for enlightenment. He does austerities, and Krishna says, ask for a benediction. So what is Brahma's benediction? He asks him several questions about the universe. And in answer to that, Krishna speaks the 4 seed verses of the Bhagavatam, the Chatushloki. And the Chatushloki is essentially a complete synopsis of the science of the Bhagavatam. That in the first 2 verses, Krishna says that I am completely independent. I am primeval. Everything depends upon me, but I am not dependent on anything. So that is Krishna's position with respect to the jiva and the material world, the sambandha gyan. Then in the 36th verse, in the next verse, 35th verse, he talks about that one's perfection of existence is establishing the relationship with me. That is prayojan. And how to overcome that? In the 36th verse, he says, the abhidaya is the practice of bhakti. So that's the essence of the Bhagavatam. It's the essence of the entire scriptures. Understand the position of Krishna, worship Krishna, and then live a life of perfection along with Krishna. So in the first 2 cantos, we see that the Bhagavatam is spoken 6 times, establishing the disciplic successions. In the 2nd canto, chapter 8 to 10, it is spoken by Lord Vishnu to Brahma. In the 2nd canto, chapters 5 to 7, Brahma speaks to Narad. In the 1st canto, chapters 4 to 6, Narad speaks to Srila Vyasadeva. Then in the 2nd canto, 1st chapter, 8th verse, and 1st canto, 7th chapter, 8th verse, Vyasadeva speaks to Sukadeva. It is related that he speaks. The speaking is not described, but the event is related. And then in the 2nd canto, chapters 1 to 3, we see Sukadeva Goswami speaking it to Maharaj Parikshit and Sutta Goswami. And the 1st canto, chapters 1 to 3, Sutta Goswami is speaking it to the stages of Naimisharanya, which essentially continues through the Bhagavatam. So the Bhagavatam concludes, or the 2nd canto concludes with a description of the structure of the Bhagavatam. That the Bhagavatam essentially speaks about 10 subjects. Atra sarga visargascha, sthanam poshanam utaya, manvantaro ishanukatha, nirodha mukti ashraya. These are the 10 subjects that the Bhagavatam will speak about. Sarga is primary creation, visarga secondary creation, sthanam is maintenance, poshanam is protection, utaya is creative impotence, which is essentially the activities of the devotees of the Lord. Manvantara is the manus, the reign of the manus. This talks about the sub-religious principles. Then Ishanukatha is the science of God, and this is essentially pastimes of his devotees. Nirodh is annihilation, the destruction of the material world and the material body. Mukti is liberation, and the 10th subject is Samambonam, Ashraya, which is Krishna. So at the conclusion of the 2nd canto, the sages, they are extremely enlightened and enlivened. And then they set the basis for the 3rd canto to be spoken, which is the Maitreya Vidur conversation. So essentially the 2nd canto is establishing the philosophical basis of the Bhagavatam. It has the Chatushloki, which basically summarizes the entire Bhagavatam in 4 verses. It talks about the Virat Roop, which is the creation and the maintenance of the universe. All these topics are spoken about in summation, and they will be expanded in different ways, different forms. But the mood of the Bhagavatam is very, very distinctly and strongly established in the second canto. The essential question that Parikshit Maharaj asked, what should a man do, is answered here. That Shavana Kirtan Smaran Vandanam, what should you do? Narayano Parogata. That everything should be directed towards Lord Narayan. What should you not do? Do not live a materialistic life. So the Prabhupada says that in a way the Bhagavatam is finished in the second canto. What follows after that is details, because the philosophical basis has been established, the summation has been given, Maharaj Parikshit's questions have been answered. But because this is Krishna Katha, because people want to know more about it, what follows in the remaining 10 cantos is an expansion. So I'll stop over here and see if you have any questions or discussion.
Hare Krishna, Bhayahari Prabhuji, thank you very much for a wonderful summary. The only question that's coming to my mind is, like you said in your class, that um, even Brahmaji or even Maharaj Parikshit, whoever is questioning the authority, they have understood. And now they're asking the next level of questions: who created, how it got created, how important or relevant it is for us, Prabhuji, to go into that kind of a insight.
Thank you. It's a good question. Um, asked. It's a question that was asked to Srila Prabhupada also, and then he makes this point that um, I can say to you that Krishna is great, and that would make an impression in your heart. But when you know really how great Krishna is, then the impression becomes actionable. Right? So I tell you Krishna is great, and you say, okay, Hare Krishna. And then, but I tell you that, look, Krishna, he's doing all these wonderful things. He's creating this universe. From the breath of Krishna, these universes are manifesting. He's empowering Brahma. By his potency, the demigods are acting. And when he breathes in, all the universes are destroyed. He personally is coming again and again. So then as we get to know more and more details, then our affection for Krishna, our regard for Krishna, appreciation of Krishna grows. So Prabhupada says that when one knows how great Krishna is, then inevitably one will worship Krishna. So this is the how great. The first part is Krishna is great. The subsequent part is now we can never know the true greatness of Krishna, but these are estimations. That imagine this long life of Brahma. It's the breath of Vishnu. So you say that's how great Krishna is. So with that, our devotion is nourished, our sense of awe and reverence is nourished. So these are all factors that accelerate the process of.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. And I understood your answer, very nicely described. This increased knowledge of Krishna, and then we taking shelter of him in awe and reverence. Would it create an inhibition in our love for Krishna?
It acts as a catalyst. So now bear in mind that this is meant for aspiring devotees, conditioned souls, right? So if somebody is already at the platform of spontaneous devotion service, they don't really care about all that, right? The gopis don't care. Like Krishna, once they were searching for Krishna, they saw Vishnu, and they go to Vishnu and they ask him, "Have you seen Krishna?" So they don't care for Krishna's Aishwarya, but they're pure devotees. But and yes, for them the Aishwarya, it would, it's something that does not inspire them. But for aspiring jivas who are conditioned, who are basically trying to enjoy the majesty of the material world, and that's what is consuming them, when they see the infinitely greater majesty of Krishna, that acts as an accelerant. It acts as a catalyst. And yes, as the person makes more progress in bhakti, then the feeling of spontaneous love and devotion, it becomes stronger and stronger. And yes, then the awe and reverence becomes subdued at uh, a much more elevated stage.
Understood, Prabhuji. Thank you for that complimentary answer. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So if there are no more questions, we'll end over here. Thank you very
Hare
much.
Krishna, Prabhu. Here is Sarangadas. Just a question, Prabhu. And when we read Srimad Bhagavatam, especially those that read the verses, don't go in the purport, and we can see in these verses, the verses that, like you said, and Prabhupada also stress on is Krishna and Narayan. There's no difference. But in this conversation, it's more about Lord Vishnu, or Narayan, and Brahma. But then some people that don't go in the purport, or don't, like people that don't come to a temple, I'm talking about, they just go online to read, or they just go brush through the main verses. They don't see Krishna yet. And also we know that the Bhagavatam is like starting from the lotus feet, you go up, 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 up until you see the face, then you see the real face of Krishna in the 10 up to 12 canto. But how will, like, people that don't go in the purport, how this will be revealed to them that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead?
So I'm trying to understand the question. So you're saying that they read the verse but not the purport, and they will see the presence of Lord Vishnu and Lord Narayan. How will they develop appreciation for Krishna, right? That's your question.
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay. Good question, Prabhu. So, yeah, I mean, definitely the purports help. But if they don't read the purports, then we see the journey through Bhagavatam itself, right? If the person is reading the Bhagavatam, even if the person not reading the purport, but if the person is reading it scrupulously, then where do all these cantos finally lead us to? They lead us to the 10th canto. And, Krishna appears. And there is glorification of Krishna as the original Brahman, the glorification of Krishna as the source, the fountainhead of all incarnations. Actually, that begins right from the first canto, where Savai Pumsha Parod. No, what's the verse? Etecham Sakala Pumsha Krishna's tu Bhagwan Swayam. So Krishna's glorification starts right from the first canto, and this tattva continues and it matures in the 10th canto, where Krishna himself and other great personalities, they establish Krishna as the basis of Lord Narayan and Vishnu and everybody else. So the Bhagavatam, even if the person is just reading the verses, the Bhagavatam guides the person ultimately to the lotus feet of Krishna.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Bhai Prabhu. Thank you so much for taking us through this summary of whole Canto 2, which is, as you rightly said, is the essence of Bhagavatam. Covered everything. I have a related question, but not exactly related to Canto 2. So we know Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that, Manmana Madbhakto, and that verse, and then many other verses where he says, always think about me, chant about me. And then we have Bhagavatam here. And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and then subsequently Prabhupada also gave the chanting the Maha Mantra. So now question is, when Parishit Maharaj is at his end of his life, or the last moment of his life, it was been chosen to listen Bhagavatam versus chanting the holy name. So is there any significance? I know both of them are important, and Prabhupada suggested to do both. But probably somewhere I have a perception chanting of the holy name is probably the most important thing. But why in this particular scenario it has been chosen to listen to Bhagavatam rather than chanting the holy name? Is that question relevant, Prabhu?
So you're saying that Parishit Maharaj, instead of listening to the Bhagavatam, could have sat and chanted Hare Krishna for the last 7 days?
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, he already saw the Supreme Personality in his mother's womb. I mean, what more we are achieving? We are probably, our goal is to see Krishna, understand Krishna, establish a relationship, which was already done, when he is in mother's womb. So now what more perfection someone would expect? And when he's about to die, that means he's probably already destined to go back to Supreme, to Godhead. But then, of course, they said message for all of us, for all the living entities, that's for sure. But why this specific out of this 9 process? Why only listening has been chosen over to chanting or any of the other 9 processes? Is there any specific significance? I know all of them are important, and any one of them can take us to perfection. But just
right.
Curious to know.
Yeah, I had two answers to this in mind, and I see that you have already covered them in your question, but I'll reflect upon them. The first is, as you said, they're all the same. So, Shravan Kirtan, Smaran Vandanam, they're all the same. Shravan Kirtan are more recommended because of their ease of access. And between Shravan Kirtan and Shravan is more recommended because it is even more easily accessible. When Krishna Katha is glorified in the Bhagavatam over and over again, Prabhupada says that all you have to do is to sit and listen with an open heart. He says anybody can do that. Now, not a lot of people do that, but anybody can do that. So Shravan is in a way, the easiest of the easiest way, and they're all the same. They're all the same. Prabhupada at one point says that Shravan Kirtan Smaran, Shravan is easy, Kirtan is a little bit more difficult, Smaran is more difficult. If you start meditating on the Lord, then he says, inevitably we will meditate on Maya. So difficult for us. Shravan Kirtan is, relatively easier. So you covered that answer. I'm reflecting that. Second part is again, you spoke about it, that Parishit Maharaj was doing it. He was perfected soul, just like Arjun was a perfected soul. He was doing it as a service. If Parishit Maharaj had sat down in a solitary place and chanted Hare Krishna, he was already destined to go back. At the time when he was born, even at that time, if you remember in the first canto, 11th chapter, right? No, not 11. I forget which chapter. In the first canto, when Parishit Maharaj is born, when the Brahmins come and do the prediction, they say that he will go back to Godhead. Obviously, Parishit Maharaj knew that he's going to go back to Godhead. But this is how those who are destined to go back to Godhead act. This is how pure devotees conduct themselves. So, like you said that this person is an expert gymnast. But what does an expert gymnast do? he practices, he maintains his body's flexibility, eats some kind of food. And so that's what an expert gymnast does. So this is what perfected devotees do. They sit, they listen about Krishna's talks, they meditate on Krishna, they chant his names. So yes, Parishar Maharaj was a perfected devotee, but this is what perfected devotees do. They sit in the association of devotees and talk about matters of Krishna. And the bonus for us is that out of that conversation came the Bhagavatam. That Parishar Maharaj could have sat and chanted, but then what would we be reading? There would be no Bhagavatam. So because Arjun took the position and asked Krishna, the Bhagavad Gita came for us to read. Parishar Maharaj took that position, and the Bhagavatam came for us to read. So, as a representation of his mercy on us, as his agreement to become a nimit matra, to become a mere tool in the hand of Krishna to preach to conditioned souls, and as a manifestation of his own pure bhakti. So all of these basically confluence together, and the Bhagavatam appeared.
Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Thank you. In the first canto, fourth chapter, in the questions asked by the sages to Sutta Goswami, these confluence of factors come in. Similar question to what you're asking, that Parishar Maharaj was already perfected. Tell us more about the qualification of the speaker, more about the qualification of the audience, more about what was spoken and why was it spoken. So all these are very related to the question that you asked. And Sutta Goswami gives this answer, that ultimately by the desire of Krishna, for the benefit of the conditioned souls, for the pleasure of Maharaj Parikshit, for the pleasure of Sukadev Goswami, for the pleasure of the sages of Naimisharanya, the Bhagavatam manifested. Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts, comments?
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Nice. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I like this answer. The perfect gymnast. How do they act? I like this analogy. That to maintain their fitness, they have to keep in the practice.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we will end here. Thank you very much. And a big thank you to all the speakers, to all of you who every week inspire me to listen to the chapter. I get whether I'm able to otherwise read the verses, but I know that one day in a week, I will always get the opportunity to listen to the nectar of the Bhagavatam from the mouth of a sincere devotee, participate in an interesting conversation. All that's made possible just because of all of you. So thank you very much for your wonderful service to Srila Prabhupada and to one another. So I'll end over here. Hare Krishna. Vanchakalpata rubesh kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo ananta koti vaishnavrinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada. Hi, Gaur.
Hare Hare Bol. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.